Welcome into another Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants broadcast, everyone. So nice to have kids joining across the continent today. I'm in Newfoundland. We've got kids in Florida, Ontario, all over the place. It's such a wild ride and such a pleasure to get to showcase the coolest scientists, explorers, and science communicators on planet Earth every single day. As you may all know, everything's on YouTube, so you can share this with your friends and family after the broadcast if you're keen on it. Now, I'm so excited today because I'm going to throw my usual intro right out the window. Farah, who's joining us today to do a live book reading and science experiment, is like one of the original OG people with me in the science communication world. So Farah, I'm going to bring you in. We'll talk about this.
Whoa!
Like back when I was like a little boy, and that's what I looked like, and I started off in science, Farah did the first ever interview with me ever before anything else in my career, and she's gone on to do like the coolest stuff ever in science in Canada, whether it's policy, SciComm, becoming an author, everything. It's such a thrill having you. You came on last year for one of my all-time favorite broadcasts, this broadcast, and it's so fun to get to do it again, showcase your amazing book, and do one of the coolest experiments in all of science. So nice to see you again, and welcome back to the program.
I mean, I just want to say, Jesse, like when I was interviewing you, I was scared, and you were the coolest person I could meet. So
we'll all be cool together. Let's just be awesome together. And for today's purpose, I'm going to zip it in a minute and leave you to explain a little bit about who you are, what you do, dive in with that reading, and then classes. We are going to go and have a fun experiment together. So, Farah, you're up. Take us away.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited that you all tuned in. I think we're going to have a really great time. Hopefully, I'll live up to Jesse's expectations. Let's go. So, I'm just going to set up my screen. And yeah, my name's Farah. I'm a genomics researcher, kind of a scientist who looks at DNA inside all of our little cells. There's also one more person who's not here today. It's my friend Hajar. And together, we actually wrote a book. We wrote a book called Khadija and the Elephant Toothpaste Experiment, which we're going to read together in a minute. We wrote this book because we really wanted to make sure that all children could see themselves reflected in science and that they get to have fun and try new experiments and do fun things, whether that's in science or beyond. So that's a little bit about us. Hajar is actually a neuroscientist, so she likes studying brains. I like to focus more on cells. Yeah. So this book is all about Khadija and the Elephant Toothpaste Experiment. It's a story about how Khadija is a young girl. She goes to a science fair, and she's inspired to carry out this experiment, this elephant toothpaste, which if you take a look at the cover, you'll realize, hey, it can be different colors. There's something happening here. And if you all follow along, we'll actually be doing this experiment at the end. So you'll be able to tell me what ingredients we'll be using, and we'll also experiment together. We'll change things up and see what happens like a real scientist. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So this book is actually illustrated by an incredible illustrator called Natalia Tariq. She's based out of Ottawa, and the illustrations are beautiful. Just mentioning it first because I'm always blown away every time I see it. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and get started with reading them. So Khadija drags Amma, Abba, and Omar to her school on a Saturday after praying Eid Salah at the mosque. Today is the big day, the science fair. Hey, that's the dish soap that you use, Abba. Are you a scientist? No, John, he laughs. I was just doing the dishes. There are so many different scientists all wearing safety goggles and lab coats. But why aren't any of the scientists wearing a hijab? She wonders. For anyone who's curious, a hijab is a scarf like the one that I'm wearing. So Khadija's just curious, like, why isn't there anyone wearing a hijab? Look, John, you can try this one, Amma says. Uncertain, Khadija asks, can I do the elephant toothpaste experiment at home? Of course, the scientist says. Ask your parents to help and just follow the instructions, like a recipe. All morning, Khadija imagines what will happen when she tries the experiment. Will there be a pop or a fizz? Will the mixture change color? But when they get home, Amma says, we'll do it later. Everyone's coming for dinner, remember? Khadija hadn't forgotten. Her grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins were all coming to celebrate Eid. But Khadija had already cleaned her room 3 times. She couldn't wait to make her own mixture change color like magic. While Amma simmers spices and ghee, Khadija finds yeast in a high kitchen cupboard, right next to the food coloring. While Abba sets the dinner table, Khadija picks out a mug. It's big, like the bottle the scientist used, and Amma's favorite. Just like the scientists at the fair, Khadija mixes all her ingredients in the mug and adds the dye last. Then she peers over the rim and waits. But nothing happens. What went wrong? Khadija wonders. She's about to add more soap to the gloopy mixture when the foam finally begins to rise. It worked, yells Khadija. The foam bubbles up until it fills the entire mug. It fizzes and froths, spilling over the rim, and it doesn't stop. Bright foam oozes across the counter and onto the floor. And the foam keeps coming. Oh no! Khadija, what's going on? Khadija freezes. Amma stops in the doorway. Is that my mug? John, what have you done? Abba says. Khadija's excitement disappears. I was trying to be like the scientists at the fair. Amma picks up her mug, now covered in the bright purple slop, and sighs. Let's clean this up. Khadija, Amma, and Abba scrub the floors and the counters and the inside of the sink, erasing every trace of the elephant toothpaste. Maybe, Khadija thinks, I'm not meant to be a scientist after all. Once the bathroom is spotless, they head downstairs for chai and samosas. Amma, Abba, I'm so sorry. I wanted to see if I could be a scientist. Well, of course you can, John, but doing experiments at home alone can be dangerous, Amma says. And messy too, says Abba. Why did you do it without us, John? I didn't know if I could be like the scientists we saw today, Khadija says. Abba frowns. Why not? But Khadija doesn't know what to say. Khadija, Amma asks, holding out her arms. Khadija climbs into Amma's lap the way little Omar does. None of the scientists wear a hijab like you. What if I want to be a scientist who wears a hijab? Khadija whispers. Amma hugs Khadija tighter and Abba says, Khadija, anyone can be a scientist. Scientists can wear a hijab like Amma or glasses like me. Khadija looks up at her parents. Really? Of course, John, Amma says, smiling softly. And that means you can too. But do you know what all scientists have in common? Khadija shakes her head. Curiosity and patience. Scientists ask questions to help us better understand the world. Amma gives Khadija a gentle squeeze. Now go get ready for dinner. Our guests will be here soon. The doorbell rings as Khadija spots a beautifully wrapped Eid gift on her bed. Opening the box, she squeals with delight. Downstairs, Amma's aloo biryani simmers on the stove, and the smell makes Khadija's stomach grumble. She hurries to join her family. Salam everyone, and Eid Mubarak, says Khadija. When I grow up, I'm going to be a scientist. Abba clears his throat and holds up rubber gloves and safety goggles. Khadija is going to begin tonight's celebrations with an experiment. With Amma and Abba's help, Khadija mixes the ingredients together. For the last step, she pours in warm water and runs back to her family. Khadija counts. 1, 2, 3. The elephant toothpaste erupts, this time pink, squirting in all directions. The foam lands on Khadija's face, Abba's hands, and even Amma's hijab. Her cousins jump and cheer, and her aunts and uncles clap. Khadija gets a round of high fives from everyone and a hug from Nani. The biggest hug comes from Amma and Abba. I'm really sorry about your mug, Amma. I didn't mean to ruin it. Amma smiles proudly. It's okay, John. Now every time I use my favorite mug, I'll think of my little scientist. And that's the story of Khadija and the elephant toothpaste experiment.
Amazing. Well, that was super fun. Thank you so much for sharing all that. Are there more slides after this, or are we good to come back to the two of us for our conversation?
I mean, I can talk about the experiment later. We can chat now.
Let's chat. Well, first and foremost, kudos on such an amazing book. How has it been becoming an author? Have you had the chance to talk about this or do this presentation or a reading at any bookstores? Has it been largely virtual? Tell us a little bit about the process.
Yeah, so what I always love to tell the people is, like, as a scientist, you share your findings through papers. You spend a lot of time, working on your experiments. And if you think that writing up about your science is hard, it's harder to get a book out there in the world. It's just sort of the process of working with literary agents, publishers. But then when the book is out there, you get to speak to so many young children like you, to people like Jesse. And then I've been to book fairs. There's so many book fairs. It's wild. And there's so many incredible other authors. So just meeting other readers, meeting other authors. It's been so much fun just this past 6 months. This book came out in February, so it's been a whirlwind.
So exciting. How long does it take to write the book? And again, you wrote with a colleague of yours. Was it like half and half? Did you write every sentence together? For anyone who might want to get into book writing themselves in our class today, what's that?
Oh yeah, everybody can write a book. It just takes time, but you should absolutely do it if you're interested. When I wrote it with Hajar, my co-author, what we did was first we sort of brainstormed, what do we want in our book? Who do we want to write about? Who do we want to write for? So we actually did a little bit of research. We're scientists at heart. It's what's going to happen. So we went and we read different books and we tried to figure out, well, where is the gap? What can we do to help fill the gap and, write stories that reflect our communities. So that's why we decided, to make sure that we have a young girl called Khadija who represents, different communities. She's Muslim, she's young, she's a girl, and she gets to do fun experiments. So that's sort of how we ended up with Khadija in the first place. But yeah, the writing was, we wrote every sentence together and there was a lot of back and forth. Like, if it takes time for you all to write a sentence, it took us double the time to write the sentence because there's only so many words you can include in a children's book. So you really have to think about what word you want to use, whether it makes sense, how it builds on the story. So this took longer to write than a lot of the papers and manuscripts that I've had to write about my research.
Yeah. And so with the elephant toothpaste experiment, which we're going to get the chance to do together very soon, it's pretty cool. So I can see why you chose it for the book. But is there any specific reason that experiment over something else? Anything that particularly a personal experience perhaps that led to that, or no?
So I'm a biologist by training, which means, I love human cells, human body. And I was like, okay, let's try something different. Let's not be what I usually am. But one of my friends is actually a chemist. Her name is Alexandra. She actually did this experiment, the elephant toothpaste experiment, on live TV. And I was just so inspired. I was like, that's such a fun experiment. So that's why we ended up picking the experiment. And just fun fact, the first time that me and Hajar, my co-author, we actually did this experiment, it did not work. So we lived Khadija's story and we had to figure out what was going on and we had to make it work. So I've lived Khadija's story.
So, but this is something that everyone can do. Like, we're going to do it together in a second, but the classes could theoretically get these same materials and do them themselves and see it at home. It's a safe, easy experiment to run for anyone. Yeah.
Anybody can do it. You can find all the supplies. You might just have to go searching a bit more for hydrogen peroxide. You might have to go to a drugstore. It is safe, but you'll notice I'm actually wearing a lab coat and I'm going to be wearing safety goggles and gloves. It's just because the hydrogen peroxide in this experiment, you want to be extra safe. You want to make sure there's an adult there, just that there's no splashback on your hands or anywhere in your face. So that's the one thing you have to be careful about, but you can do it all at home with just enough protection.
Very, very cool. And what a cool lab coat. I didn't even know that was a lab coat up until just now. So that's awesome that you can have a bright pink one. That's amazing. And with that, you know what? If we want to dive in together, what we're going to do is, Ms. Ramos' class, your guys' mic is on. I can come to you to chime in and see how you want to make the experiment go. Ms. Avila's class, you guys can type it in the chat. Ms. Smith and anyone else on YouTube, please do chime in because we're going to take some input from our audience today as we get set up for our experiment. Wow, this looks so... It's so rare for us to do an experiment live on camera. This is so fun.
Great. I'm going to first talk you through what I'm going to do. Let's actually figure out what goes into the experiment. So if I share my screen with all of you one more time.
Yeah.
So there are only a very few things that go in the elephant toothpaste experiment. The first is active yeast. So has anyone ever baked bread? Because that's exactly what we're going to be using. We're using a little bit of yeast. We're also using warm water, so straight from the kitchen tap. You're also going to use some hydrogen peroxide, and this is where the experimenting comes in. I'll mention a little bit more about that. And there's liquid detergent, so your regular dish soap, and food coloring. I actually have a lot of color options, and I'm going to be asking all of you for what colors you want to be using in this experiment. And just to explain the science behind the experiment, so the idea is that here you've got the yeast, which goes into making things like baking bread. And if you've ever seen your parents bake bread, you'll notice the bread rises in the oven, right? That's thanks to this yeast. Yeast is very special. It contains chemicals which can help create that air bubbles to help the bread rise. And we're using sort of the same idea in this experiment. We're taking hydrogen peroxide, which can usually break down into oxygen and water, but that happens very slowly. By adding in the yeast and the liquid detergent, the yeast helps break down the hydrogen peroxide faster, we get the foam coming out, and we get the experiment happening. And the detergent helps by just slowing the reaction just down, just a little bit, so that we get some really beautiful foam coming out. It's easy for me to talk a lot about this, but it'll make sense when we actually do the experiment. And that's where all the color and the different types of hydrogen peroxide will come in. So I'm going to come back here. I'm going to start off by grabbing a beaker. Hydrogen peroxide. So the one thing I want to mention is that there are different types of hydrogen peroxide. So for example, there's 3% hydrogen peroxide, there's 6% hydrogen peroxide, there's also 12% hydrogen peroxide, which we'll use later. And the thing is, the different types of hydrogen peroxide you use will change how quickly the experiment happens. So if I use 3%, it'll be a little slow. If I use 6%, it'll be a little faster. Let's actually try 6% first, and then we'll try out the different types. So what's going to happen first is I'm going to squirt a little bit of detergent, and I'm also just going to, you're not going to see my face for a little bit, but that's okay. You're going to see the experiment happening instead. So step one is me squirting in the liquid detergent. So I just put in a little bit. I'm also just going to wear my gloves. Okay. So step two is I want my yeast and water. So what I'm going to be doing is just pouring a little bit of water into a bowl, and then we're going to add in some yeast. If I can maybe get one of the classes to actually tell me what their favorite colors are, we can use that.
Absolutely. I'll bring up Miss Ramos' class. Favorite colors, third graders. What do we think? Yeah.
Hello. What color? Black and red. Black, pink, black, red, green.
Black, green. All the colors, Laura.
So I'm hearing a black. I'm hearing a yellow.
Yep, yellow, red, green, red, orange. I've heard pink. All the colors.
We can do black. I've got a black around here. It's going to be an interesting color at the end. Okay. So thanks everyone for giving me suggestions. Right now I've got the yeast and water ready. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to pour in half the yeast and water. There we go. And then next I'm going to add in the food coloring. So black's a fun color. Let's go with like 5 drops maybe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to swirl it around a little bit so that we're getting the black. Oh, this is going to be a fun one. Okay, so we've got black. And now we're ready for the last step, which is the hydrogen peroxide. So can I actually get a countdown from maybe one of the classes?
Absolutely. I know we've got our one live class, and Miss Ramos' class. We'll bring you in for the countdown. If you want to count us down from how far, Farah?
Maybe 5. Yeah.
5. Okay, we'll do it together.
8, 9, 10.
All right.
Here we
It's
go.
rising. It's rising. And it's still rising. It'll fall in a few seconds. But that's sort of an example of the elephant toothpaste experiment. The experiment is still running, so that's why we're still getting the rising, but eventually it's going to start falling. And we've got different shapes. So for example, I've also got test tubes, and you'll see the different shapes that we use will change how the experiment happens. This one is looking like a bit of a mushroom.
It is a mushroom. It's a big old
Yeah.
mushroom.
Yeah. And then the black that you see actually kind of became gray because it's been a little diluted out because we had some water in there, we had some detergent. I'm going to put it over here on the side so that it continues to fall as it wants to. But that's an example of the elephant toothpaste experiment. Usually it gives a little bit more of a rise, but we will let's try a different one and see what happens. So can I get another favorite color from somebody?
Yeah, so Miss Avila's class said purple, like uniformly purple. So if we want to do that, that would be
Ooh.
awesome.
Absolutely. Okay, I've added in some yeast. I'm going to add in a little bit more yeast and water. Let's see what happens when we add more yeast and water and what happens if we add 12% hydrogen peroxide this time.
Ooh.
So we're getting in some detergent. And you'll notice that the sky is actually beginning to fall a bit more. All right, so purple, purple, purple. I've actually got violet, so I hope that's okay.
That's good. What rainbow color?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, we've got 6 drops of violet. I'm going to mix it up here so it's a nice, beautiful violet.
Beautiful.
Okay. We've got yeast. And this time, I'm actually going to do 12% hydrogen peroxide. So
we can do a countdown again if you'd like. I'll bring the Rainbow class for the countdown.
Yes,
And you can. So, okay, you're in the background. You guys can count us down again, okay? Go for it.
1, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4,
3, 2, 1.
pretty one. Like a mushroom cloud.
And it's still going, so I'm going to lower it a bit more so you can see.
Wow.
So this one is a very pretty mushroom glob. And you can't see, but it's actually a little hot. There's a little bit of steam up here, so that's why gloves are important. But that's what happens when you use 12% hydroperoxide. It's just a little bit more concentrate. But let's try a different shape this time. Let's see what happens if we use a test tube. For this, can I get a favorite color from somebody?
Yeah, you know what? Miss Smith's class, you guys are on YouTube. If you want to chime in the YouTube chat, we'd love to hear a color from your class. We'll see what we get in a few seconds, but we'll start off with our yeast. We'll get that all in. We've seen...
Look at you, Jesse. You know everything that's going to happen in this experiment.
I'm trying. I'm following along a little bit. Now we got this guy, our water bottle of science.
Yes,
Okay.
water bottle science.
Any queries, any colors? Let's see. Oh, we got a color. We love blue. Blue, they said.
Blue.
Okay, let's do it.
We absolutely do blue. All right, I've mixed up my yeast. I'm going to go for a sky blue this time.
Ooh.
Sky. And just so people know, this is just regular food coloring. So the type of coloring you use in desserts, that's exactly what you can use in this experiment. Okay, I put in more than 5. We've got a really nice blue going on here. All right. So because it's a bit of a skinnier test tube, I'm going to pour in just a little bit of yeast. All right, we're going to pour in just a little bit more. Okay, we've actually poured in quite a bit, but that's okay. All right, so we've got yeast. This time, can I get a vote from someone? Do we want 3%, 6%, or 12% hydroperoxide?
Okay, Miss Avila's class, do you want to put it in the chat? We'll see what you think. Oh, we got a chat. They want 12%. Miss Ramos' class, 12%? Yeah. Well, we have a mix of 3 and 12. So, Farah, just to explain for our kids again, does 12 mean like more action and more excitement?
Of course. So 3% is the least concentrated. So what it means is that there's less hydrogen peroxide compared to just the overall fluid or the volume or the liquid. In 6%, there's more hydrogen peroxide. In 12%, there's the most hydrogen peroxide. So whenever I ask, everybody always wants the 12%, which makes sense. We want to see fast experiments. Let's try the 3% next time. But yeah, for this one, let's do 12% and see what happens. Can I get another countdown this time?
You guys are my countdown crew at Claude Pepper, so go for it. Count us down again, guys.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Here we go. Oh, sky blue. Look
That's so satisfying.
at it. It is so satisfying.
It is very satisfying. And it's all falling. So one thing you might notice is that...
Sorry, tell us what we noticed. I just wanted to bring them back in because they're hilarious.
Oh, good. So what I wanted to say is that the different shapes that you use for the experiment changes how the foam comes out. So notice how this one, it sort of came over and it tipped over. This one over here was more of a mushroom shape. So the different shapes also cause that's another way to experiment around and see what happens. But yeah, I'm gonna pop this guy in here as it keeps going. We can do more experiments or we can take questions up to what everybody wants.
Let's do one more. If we did our one amount of hydrogen peroxide, we can do one more and then we'll dive in with questions. So kids, I want you to think about questions about the experiment, about the book, about how you might get into science, anything you want to know. And we're going to go into that after one more epic experiment. And Ms. Ramos' class, you guys can count us down one more time in just a second. But Farrell, I'll get it all ready. What do you want to share with us?
So this time, why don't we actually do 2 at the same time? Let's try the 3% and let's try the 6%. And let's see what happens.
Ooh, you rebel. So exciting.
I know. I brought extra this time so that we could do all the experiments that people want. So can I get 2 colors from 2 different folks?
Okay, Ms. Ramos, it's been a while since you said a color. What's a color? I did hear quite a few red, and I heard quite a few green.
Okay.
Does that work? Very Christmassy.
I have a nice red. Let's see if I have a different blue. I only have sky blue, which is fine. Yeah. Okay, so we'll put red in one and blue in another. I'm just going to bring us down here. So we are looking at these two small guys. I've added detergent in already, and now I'm going to add red. So red. And now I'm going to add blue.
Oh.
All right. We're doing 3% and 6%.
Yep.
I'll just randomly pick which one goes with which. But for now, we're gonna mix a little. What can I get predictions from the different classes? So who thinks that the 3% will be faster than the 6%?
What do we think? Put up your hand if you think 3 is faster than 6.
3.
No. 6 is faster than 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's what I think.
Love it.
Yeah.
Everybody's paying attention. You all can do this experiment at home. I'm just doing some water and some yeast right now. We're gonna mix it up. Okay, so I'm gonna pour in a healthy amount of yeast in both. You can see that this one's nice and red, the other one's nice and blue. And can we get another one more countdown?
Here we go. One more countdown.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right.
Here we go. Oh, they're mixing.
They
So
are mixing.
I love it. This is great.
So if anybody was keeping track, I had added the blue one was the 3%, the red one was the 6. The red one looks like a little mushroom over here. But yeah, the red one was much faster. I'm gonna pick it up right here, and you can see they're very beautiful colors. So we only put one color in each one this time, but you can also mix colors and change things up too. So yeah, that's the elephant toothpaste experiment. It's all things that you can use from home. That's hydrogen peroxide, which you do need to buy from a drugstore, water, which you can get from your kitchen sink, yeast, and detergent. So that's all you need to actually do the elephant toothpaste experiment at home.
Amazing. Well, that was so much fun. We got to do so many in different containers with different levels of power, and it's all crazy in front of you. It looks like quite the cleanup job. So we're going to dive in with questions now. So our YouTube audience, if you guys want to share some there, Miss Avila, you can share in the StreamYard chat. And Miss Ramos, our epic countdowners, if you have a question for Farah, we'll come to you first, and you can ask anything you'd like about the experiment, the book, or anything. But let's come and see what's going on in Miami. Hi, third graders. Do you have a question?
Question, Skylar, come. No, Abigail. What?
Hey, Abigail.
Come on. Question.
And that's okay if you're just over here. Hi, Abigail.
Hi, how does it go up? Like, I was wondering.
Yeah, what's going on?
Great question. So what's happening is that hydrogen peroxide usually breaks into water and oxygen gas, but it would take a really long time to do this on its own. So when I add in yeast, when I activate that yeast with water and I mix it together, the yeast includes a chemical which breaks down the hydrogen peroxide faster, getting us those beautiful oxygen gas bubbles. But the thing is, if we just did yeast and water, that experiment would happen too fast. That's why we need detergent. Like, it seems very simple, but the detergent is actually doing a very important job. It's trapping the gas bubble, so it's slowing it down so that we can actually see that little foam rise. So it's really a collection of all these basic, household materials, but when they come together, we get this beautiful elephant toothpaste.
Very, very cool. We had a great question from Miss Avila's class, also joining us in Miami today. So they wanted to know, what's the biggest reaction you've had? What's the biggest version of this that you've ever done personally?
I mean, 12%. This is a game changer. I only added very little in the ones we were doing today, but we can do one more at the end. It really rises. Like, the more stronger your hydrogen peroxide is, the faster it'll go, the higher it'll go. There's actually, 18% too, but I do want to mention that the more stronger the hydrogen peroxide is, the safer you need to be. So always make sure you've got the gloves, the lab coat, and everything. But yeah, 12% is the furthest I've gone. Maybe I'll find 18% and try that too.
And then a nice follow-up to that is there like a limit to how much you could put in. Like if you made like a giant container that was this big and had it filled with yeast and poured it in, could you make a gigantic like 20-foot version of this? Is that possible, or is there a limit to it?
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. You can make a huge version of it. You just need to make sure, like, is there enough yeast and water? Is there enough hydrogen peroxide? You want to match it because, for example, if all I add is hydrogen peroxide and I add in like half a teaspoon of yeast, it's going to be a slow reaction because there isn't enough yeast to break down that hydrogen peroxide. Or in contrast, like if I add a ton of yeast, but only like 1 teaspoon of hydrogen peroxide, it's not going to work, right? So we want to make sure we're matching the ingredients. So kind of like how you follow a recipe to bake bread or cake, you always follow sort of the ingredients and how much you have to add. It's same for an experiment. You're kind of just following a recipe and trying to recreate that mess. And we experiment. So you can absolutely experiment and figure out, hey, you know what? If I add in 10 tablespoons of hydrogen peroxide to 1 tablespoon of yeast, that's a perfect reaction. You can also change it up, different colors. You can try different chemicals. So it's very open and sort of that's the fun part of being a scientist. You get to try it out and see what works safely.
Safely. We keep highlighting that. But yes, lab coat, goggles, all important things for this process. We're going to head back to our live class in just a second. We got one more of, is there another experiment that you would recommend? I mean, elephant toothpaste, of course, we've covered a lot today. It's featured in the book. Is there any other really cool thing that our classes could do at home when they're done this broadcast?
Mm-hmm. I always love sort of the volcano experiment, the lava, which you can just recreate. There's also sort of the rainbow experiment where you see how kind of color diffuses down paper. There's really a lot of experiments. I'll actually mention a book that would be great for people who want to do experiments. It's by Emily Calandrelli. It's called Stay Curious and Keep Exploring. Yes, thank you, Jesse. So there are a ton of experiments in that book. Definitely check it out. There's also Science Bay or Sarah Habibi. She's on Instagram. She's on YouTube. She also shares experiments. So like Sarah Habibi, Emily Calandrelli, 2 amazing people who have so many experiments that you can do at home. I love the elephant toothpaste experiment, but there's so many more experiments out there.
Fantastic. And thanks for the plug for some other really special science communicators. We've had Emily on many times, and she's a lot of fun. So do check out some books, things online. And I brought up the WikiHow as well for Make Elephant Toothpaste. So this is featured in the book. Anything you guys want to check out, it's all right there. We're going to take one more quick question before we head off, and then we'll do one more experiment before we wrap up. So the question online is, what made you want to be a scientist? Was there a specific thing that jumped out?
So some people have sort of that one moment. For me, it was, I think, multiple moments. I think one of the moments was like, as a kid, I loved to read. One of the books that my parents got me was actually this book called The Big Book of Knowledge. It was just full of things about nature. It was full of things about science. And I just loved reading it. I think that's where I became a lot more curious about the world. And then as a kid, or more of a teenager, I used to watch this show called NCIS. It's kind of like a crime show, but in that crime show, there was this forensic scientist called...
Oh, we froze for a second. The NCIS people don't want you to know.
For experiments, you can use science to try and find clues to crimes.
Farah, you just disappeared for a second. Sorry, NCIS. We just got the beginning of that, and then you cut out for like 2 seconds. Tell us more. Again, sorry.
Oh, no. That's so sad. Okay. So NCIS is kind of a crime show. There's this forensic scientist called Abby Shudo on it. She uses a lot of fun science to try and get clues and solve crimes. There's also like a physician who does autopsies. And because of them, I was just like, hey, science, medicine. These are kind of cool ways to learn more about the world. And that's how I sort of ended up being like, okay, I want to learn more about DNA. I want to learn more about cells. So yeah, for me, it was reading and maybe a little bit of NCIS.
Very, very cool. I know those characters well, and they are fantastic sort of springboards into the scientific realm. We got a student right at the camera in Miss Ramos' class, so we'll bring them in for a question as we set up our final experiment as well. But come on in, guys. Hi.
Well, why do some people fail? It's like the opposite, like the volcano project, the fake volcano. It's like this one, but harder. They fail it because they don't know the ingredients yet. They put the wrong ingredients.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's like soap, Mentos, or Coke that you could use Mentos.
Man, you know a lot about experiments. That's awesome. So, Farah, why do these experiments fail sometimes? Is there anything that just jumps out? Is it they're using the wrong ingredients, the wrong ratio? What might be the problem?
Yeah. I mean, when I first tried the elephant toothpaste experiment, it didn't work for me. And the mistake I made was I thought, hey, hydrogen peroxide, what if I just use bleach from home? Not the same thing. So you definitely want to make sure that you're using sort of the same ingredients. You're making sure you're double checking against sort of the things that are in the experiment instructions. You want to make sure you're also sort of, following the instructions. So sometimes it's wait, sometimes it's make sure you use warm water for the yeast, not cold. So you want to make sure you're following the instructions. And sometimes it's just things that are out of your control. Like maybe there's humidity, like maybe your experiments or supplies are just expired and you need new supplies. So there's so many reasons. It's usually not the person's fault. Like maybe they misread the instructions. Maybe their ingredients are wrong. It can be a lot of things, but what's important is that you kind of have to work through and be like, okay, I know this ingredient is working. I know that ingredient is working. So you kind of have to put it together and figure out, okay, where did I go wrong? What do I need to try and fix it? So that's kind of, I guess, the detective work involved in being a scientist. You sometimes just have to play around and see what works.
No better answer than that. That's what science is all about. Well, we're going to dive in with one final experiment. So get ready for one epic last countdown, folks. I want to highlight again, you can do this at home. WikiHow has an amazing page on this. And Khadija and the elephant toothpaste experiment, please do check it out at your local library. Get it for your class, whatever. There's lots of opportunities to read it. It's such a fun book, and you can share it with your friends and family both. Looks like we got a cool new vessel for this, Farah.
We've got a little bit of a milk bottle for this one. I've got all the shapes. I have been prepared. So for this one, can I get somebody's favorite color for this last experiment?
Yeah, Miss Ramos' class. Favorite color? I heard pink and orange, which are ones we haven't done so far. So I like either of those. Those are great. Orange is very Halloween-y.
Yeah. I've got pink and orange, so we can absolutely do that. Can the different classes who are here, can you now tell me what goes in the experiment ingredients?
Ooh, do you guys remember what goes in the experiment?
10, 9.
Oh no, we're getting a countdown.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I'm gonna need a minute, guys, but I love the enthusiasm.
I love your enthusiasm, though. You guys rock. That was awesome. We got to get the color in first, everybody. But
so I've added in the detergent. I've added in the yeast and the water. I'm now going to be adding in a few drops of pink. And I'm going to add in a few drops of yellow. I've actually got a sunset yellow here. So we've got sunset yellow. I'm going to mix it all up by just swirling it. And for this one, do we want 3%? Do we want 6%? Or do we want 12% hydrogen peroxide? I mean, I'm not surprised. All right, let's grab some 12%. Now, can I get a countdown?
Countdown again. One more time. Sorry. Go for it.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yes, do it.
And yeah, that one's going.
It was crazy. That was so much fun. Farah, thank you so much for all of this, your book reading, the amazing experiments, the mess you've made. That's science in a nutshell. It's so much fun. Before we wrap up and bring the classics to say a thank you and farewell, is there any last message you want to leave them about your book, about the experiment, anything to wrap us up today?
Yeah. I mean, I know I talked a lot about science today, but I do want to say that please do explore what you're interested in, whether that's reading, whether that's science, whether that's watching shows like NCIS, like whatever you're interested in, please be curious, ask questions, and just explore the world. I hope it's science. I hope it's a book, but whatever it is that inspires you, please do go out and explore it.
Thank you so much, and no better message than that. We're going to bring in Ms. Ramos' class. Do a big thank you, and for all Ms. Afila's class, our YouTube class. You can yell and scream at home. It's more fun that way. So come on in, Miami. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful day.